Hello everyone, my name is Pollock. I'm a registered dietitian here at the Prostate Cancer Center and at BC Cancer, and today we're going to have a presentation on nutrition for men with prostate cancer. So in today's session we are going to talk about the benefits of healthy eating, what a balanced diet looks like for prostate cancer, and specific food and nutrients of interest for prostate cancer. So what's been studied specifically for this disease. And also some symptom management and kind of how you can use nutrition to combat some of the side effects of the treatments of prostate cancer. So to get started, the benefits of healthy eating. So nutrition is part of your day-to-day lifestyle, and we want to use nutrition to help us feel our best. This can be more and more challenging depending on your disease, your treatment, and other lifestyle factors, but we can really use nutrition to help manage these treatment side effects and other lifestyle side effects. There's lots of research looking into nutrition for slowing down growth of prostate cancer and reducing your chance of recurrence, and overall just having good general health, so decreasing our risk of diabetes and heart disease and all these other things that we don't want on top of our prostate cancer diagnosis. So having a cancer diagnosis, especially one that affects our hormones like prostate cancer, can change the way that our body metabolizes and stores foods. Inflammation, so in your prostate area or throughout your body, so if you're going through a chemo, it creates a whole sense of inflammation. It can also play a role in how we use these nutrients. Treatments like hormone therapy, where we decrease the amount of testosterone in our body, can make this even worse. So it really affects how we metabolize and store nutrients. Oftentimes with those we see loss in muscle mass and an increase in fat mass, so all the things that we don't want. So we have to use different lifestyle factors like exercise and nutrition to try to combat this. These changes in our body composition really puts us at higher risk for developing other diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and osteoporosis, which we definitely don't want. So what is an anti-cancer diet? I'm sure a lot of us have heard about what anti-cancer diets are and cancer-fighting foods and a lot of those terms that are thrown around in the media, which when you take to the internet can be very overwhelming and very mixed as far as what they say about it. So in this presentations and also with our organization, we like to base a lot of these recommendations on scientific literature and good strong research. So in general, what the recommendations are is really focusing on more plant-based foods. So not necessarily going vegan or vegetarian, but incorporating more foods from plants, which we'll talk a lot about today. And focusing less on animal foods, so finding ways to have some plant-based proteins in your diet and less meats and dairy. Choosing more minimally processed foods and incorporating some healthy fats, so both of which we're going to talk a little bit more about today. So this here is the Healthy Plate from Canada's New Food Guide, and it also aligns with the recommendations from the American Institute of Cancer Research, and it just shows kind of the proportions of what you should be having at each meal. So with half your plate being fruits and vegetables, and then a quarter being proteins, and the other quarter choosing whole grain foods. So we're going to go through kind of each of those groupings individually and look at kind of how that all comes together in a meal. So starting with the big one, fruits and vegetables. So we want to aim for about at least 5 servings of non-starchy vegetables, so vegetables that aren't from potatoes or carrots, kind of those ones that come from the ground that are more starchy, and fruits each day, so having a variety of the two groups. So 5 servings, a serving is about half a cup of vegetables, or if you're choosing something lighter like a leafy green, it's more of a cup because there's lots of airspace in there. And so a good way to reach these 5 servings is having some form of fruit and vegetable at each meal, ideally half your plate if we're looking back at the plate model. But if you don't get it at each of your meals, you can make it up in things like snacks, smoothies. There's lots of ways to incorporate fruits and vegetables throughout the day. So this can be fresh fruits and vegetables, frozen, canned, as long as they're minimally processed and with less salt added. You want to aim for a good variety of colors. We're going to talk about the different phytonutrients that give the fruits and vegetables their colors. And we do want to limit juice. So oftentimes we see things like orange juice with lots of vitamin C, or these fresh green juices with all these different vegetables in them. So the only reason why I'd say choose actual fruits and vegetables over juice is because when they juice the vegetable, they remove all the fiber. And so if you're comparing an orange to a cup of orange juice, there's going to be a lot less fiber in the orange juice. And the fiber really helps with controlling our blood sugars, so it takes us longer to digest. So instead of having a cup of juice and getting those huge blood sugar spikes, when we have the actual piece of fruit, it tends to spike our sugars a little bit less. So things like the whole fruit, or having a smoothie where you put the whole fruit in it, you're just blending it up, are better options over juices. But juices are fine once in a while. So protein foods, so that's the top kind of quarter of our plate. So we want it can be a mix of proteins from plants and proteins from animals. So for a lot of us, the plant-based proteins may be a little more unfamiliar. So these are things like legumes, so soy, dried peas, beans, lentils, nuts and seeds. Those are some common ones. So these tend to be lower in calories and saturated fat than animal proteins. And then also, not only does it provide protein, but they tend to provide good sources of fiber and vitamins and minerals. That being said, we can still have animal proteins. So things like meats, seafood, dairy, eggs, so anything that comes from an animal. So they do have a great source of protein, but they don't have things like the fiber in it. That only comes from plant-based sources. So why is protein important in our diet? So it really helps us grow cells, keep on muscle mass. Like we were saying earlier, that when we are in like a treatment like a hormone therapy, it can be really hard to keep that muscle mass on, and the protein really helps support it and build it. So in general, when we're looking for proteins in our diet, we want to choose plant-based proteins more often, but there's still room for meats and dairy and eggs in our diet, as long as you enjoy them. You want to include fish 2 or more times a week as an option. Limit red meat to about 500 grams of meat a week. That's about a serving of about 6 packs of carbs. So including red meat a couple times a week is okay. You want to avoid processed meat more often. So that's things like anything that's cured, so like bacon or sausage or salami. Those are all more processed meats. Or luncheon meats that you find in the deli. Those tend to have quite a bit of sodium added and preservatives, and we do want to limit that. And then when choosing poultry, just taking time to remove the skin from it, it's a good way to decrease the amount of fat you're getting from the chicken. So on to our third section on the plate, whole grains. So a whole grain encompasses the bran, germ, and endosperm. Those are the 3 parts of a grain. They're an excellent source of fiber and energy, so we do want to include whole grains in our diet. So that's things like quinoa, barley, brown rice. Those are all examples of whole grain. We do want to avoid the grains that are more white, so white rice, white bread. So the thing with white grains is they tend to remove a good chunk of the grain, so you're only left with the endosperm. And that's not where you're going to be getting the fiber and the healthy fats and some of the good nutrients in. So one example is if you're looking for a bread, you want to be looking for ones that on the label say a whole grain bread, versus a white bread, which is just going to be the endosperm, or sometimes even a whole wheat bread. So with a whole wheat, oftentimes it is a white bread, but then they just add back in a little bit of the bran just for flavor, for color. So you're still not getting the whole grain, which is what we're aiming for. So back to our plate, we've gone through kind of the 3 sections. So in general, you want half of your plate to be those fruits and vegetables, a quarter to be whole grains. So like we were saying, the barley, oatmeal, quinoa. And 1/4 to be a protein-rich food, preferably plant-based ones more often. So this is just a good little tool to just show the proportions of what you're supposed to eat. I do understand that no meal is going to be perfect and have all three at each time, but it does show a good depiction of, your proportions throughout the day. So maybe your plate at breakfast isn't half fruits and vegetables, but if you make it up in some snacks later in the day, that's a good way to try to meet your needs there. So these are just some meal examples showing that no meal needs to look perfect as one plate divided up. So for example, if you're making a pasta, oftentimes we have a big heaping plate of spaghetti, and then there's maybe a few vegetables mixed in with the sauce or on the side. So here on the left we have a pasta, but you can see there's tons and tons of vegetables added in, and that's technically how we're supposed to get the half of it being vegetables. So our meals might be looking a little different than what we're traditionally used to. So taking the time to add in those vegetables to make half your plate vegetables. So maybe grating some zucchini into your pasta sauce or adding a side salad when you're having some pizza. There's little ways to sneak in vegetables there. I do find here breakfast to be one of the more challenging ones to get some vegetables and fruit in. Typically in our Western diet, our breakfasts are very carb heavy, so a muffin or a bagel with some cream cheese to go. It's quick and it's fat, gives us some fast energy. But there's some ways we can sneak in some fruits and vegetables with breakfast too. So if you're doing some toast with some eggs, add in some stewed tomatoes or something in the scrambled eggs, add in some vegetables. If you're just having some yogurt and granola, that's a good opportunity to add some sliced banana or any seasonal fruit in there. But if you're just a toast with peanut butter person and that's what you like every morning, try using your mid-morning snack as a way to make up for what you didn't get at breakfast. So have a smoothie in the middle of the day, or pack a banana or an apple with you when you go to work. So moving on to fats. So fats are really important in our body, but in the right type and proportion. So there's some solid evidence to demonstrate that both the amount of fat and type of fat we're eating can influence prostate cancer progression. So we're going to go through a few of the different types of fats. Keeping in mind, we do actually really need fat for our brain, for a lot of body functions. Some fats we really need to get through our diet. Our body can't make it themselves, and some vitamins need fats to be absorbed. So right here is a good little chart, and it goes through the different types of fats and ones that we should be choosing more often and less often. So it's a little bit of a cheat sheet. So the top ones are the ones we should be choosing more often. So these are the unsaturated fats, and under that is the omega fats. So a good kind of rule of thumb is the unsaturated fats, the ones we should be choosing, are liquid at room temperature. But then the ones we should be limiting, the saturated fats, those tend to be solid at room temperature. So as far as those unsaturated, those healthy fats, there are things like avocado, nut oils, vegetable oils, so like olive oil, and omega fats that we also want to be including. Those come from fatty fish, so things like salmon and mackerel and trout, but also some plant-based sources like walnuts, flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp hearts. So there's good ways to include omega fats from both plants and animals. Now when it comes to the saturated fats, so the ones we want to limit, those tend to come from high-fat dairy, so butters and high-fat creams, and also some meats, so that like solid meat that comes around your steak, those fatty meats. Those are those saturated fats that we want to limit more often. So it is okay to have dairy, but you do want to choose the lower fat dairy to limit the amount of saturated fat. Now, some people, when they see this list, one thing that kind of stands out is the coconut oil being a saturated fat that you should limit more often. So coconut oil is usually marketed as a health food, and it's delicious. But we do want to watch how much coconut oil we are using. It is very high in saturated fat, and what a lot of the research has shown that it's when we look at our cholesterol levels when we consume coconut oil, it does raise our good cholesterol, so our HDL, but at the same time it also raises our bad cholesterol, so the LDL. So that being said, it's okay in small amounts. It adds some good flavor, but I don't want it to be your primary source of oil in your diet. choose things like avocado oil or olive oil more often than a saturated fat like coconut oil. So processed foods. So the less processed foods, the better. So choosing foods in its whole form and cooking your own meals is the gold standard, but healthy eating can look different in so many different ways. So including processed food is fine, but we do want to avoid foods that are have lots of added fats, so added saturated fats to it, which tends to be the case in some processed foods like potato chips. The high saturated fats can be hard on our heart and can lead to heart disease. Sugar, so we have to watch the amount of sugar being added to processed foods. So things like sweetened yogurts or ketchups, they tend to be very high in sugars, and those can increase our risk of diabetes down the road. And then the third one that tends to be high in processed foods is salt. So things like potato chips or cured meats, they tend to have a lot of salt in it. For flavor, it's a natural preservative. And high sodium diets, they can increase our blood pressure, and it can also increase our risk of osteoporosis, which is one of the ones we're watching out for down the road. That's because a lot of sodium in our body, it can flush out some of that calcium that our bones are trying to absorb. So when you're picking processed food, which is fine, it's good to use the nutrition facts tables on it to evaluate whether it's a good choice or maybe a choice you shouldn't choose as often. So we like to aim for foods that are less processed and don't have nutrition facts label. But that being said, there's many healthy foods that we incorporate in our diet that are processed in some way that do have nutrition facts labels. So even if it's like canned bean or canned tomato sauce, this is when we want to use the nutrition facts tables to make better choices. So I do find these facts tables really helpful for comparing products. So the number one thing you'd want to look for is at the very top, you look at the amount of foods, that's the serving size. So if you're looking at 2 cans of tomato sauce, you want to make sure you're comparing the same amount. So one may say half a cup and one may say 3/4 a cup, so you got to do a little mental math. And then the next kind of thing to look at is the percent daily value. So that's usually on the right hand side next to each nutrient. And it's based on just what a standard average diet is. So a good rule of thumb is that for any nutrient is that 5% or less for your percent daily value equivalates to a little bit. And then 15% or more is a lot. So then you have to use your thinking and figure out which ones do you want a little bit of and which ones do you want a lot of. So if we're back at that tomato sauce, when you're looking at, you want to look at, say, the sugar and the salt, and you want those to be closer to 5 or less percent. But if you're looking at certain nutrients or fiber, you want that to be on the higher side. So Health Canada is actually changing their nutrition facts tables, and it's a long process because there's a lot of food and companies to work with. But by 2022, our nutrition facts tables are going to be looking a little bit different, and it should be making it easier for people. So what they are going to add is, so right now under our carbohydrates, it breaks it up into fiber and sugar, and then they're going to be adding that percent daily value to both the fiber and the sugar. So it'll be easier to look at the numbers and compare that. They are also going to be changing the ingredient list. So right now we have the ingredients going from the number one ingredient with the most amount in it to the less. But right now all the sugars, the different types of them are listed in a million different types. So now they're going to be grouping them all together. So it'll make it a little bit easier to see what sugars are being used. And the serving sizes, they're working on making it more comparable, so it'll be a lot easier to compare products. So you have to do less mental math in the grocery store. Okay, so moving on to alcohol. So in general, alcohol is a risk factor for a variety of different cancers. So in general, we want to abstain or limit from it. Keeping in mind, alcohol, it tends to be higher in calories, and so if weight maintenance or weight loss is one of your goals, keeping in mind it does contribute to weight gain. But that being said, there is room for alcohol in our diet for celebrations or with dinner now and then. So if you do choose to drink, in general, for men, we want to limit to 2 servings a day for men, and women, it's 1 serving a day. That being said, we can't hoard up all of our servings of alcohol and have it just on Friday and Saturday, we can have all our week's worth. It's 2 servings at a time, and you try not to go beyond that. So phytonutrients. So phyto means plants. So these are plant-based chemicals and nutrients. They promote health and tend to lower our risk of certain types of cancers. So we all kind of know the saying to eat the rainbow. We've learned it for a long time, and that's pretty much what this is based around. Each color is kind of a representation of a different type of phytonutrient. So that's why, in general, we want to add variety into our diet. So not only having just broccoli every single day, but having some eggplant and broccoli and cauliflower, a variety of different colors. So one of the phytonutrients is lycopene, and we're going to talk about that in a bit because that's one that's actually been studied for prostate cancer specifically. So that's one of the red colors we see there. So many of these phytonutrients act as antioxidants in our body, and we often hear antioxidants as being really healthy and good for us. So what antioxidants do is they protect our cells from being damaged, and these damaged cells can often lead to cancer. So antioxidants can come from many different things. So fruits, vegetables, green teas, certain vitamins like vitamin A and C, some minerals. There's a whole range out there. So that being said, the only time I would say watch out for your antioxidants is when you're going through certain treatments like radiation treatment. So like I said, antioxidants are usually great. They protect our cells from damage. But if you think about it, a radiation treatment, the whole point of it is to come in and damage the cancer cells. So even though antioxidants are great, they're not very smart. So they're protecting our cells, but sometimes they're also protecting the cancer cells. When you're trying to target it, it kind of muddles the effect of the treatment. So what I would recommend if you are going through a treatment like that is still take fruits and vegetables and food sources rich in antioxidants, but watch out for things like supplements, so like a vitamin C supplement. It's just such in a high dose that we want to use it with caution in that time. If we look at a vitamin C supplement, one standard one in a grocery store can sometimes equivalent to about 20 oranges, so it's hard to compare the two. So food's okay, but I would watch for supplements when you're going through treatment. So on to lycopene. So that was the one the red color that we saw in the phytonutrient chart. So it is one of those phytonutrients that has strong antioxidant properties, and it has been shown to have a protective link between lycopene and prostate cancer. That being said, some of the research is a little mixed, so the actual dosing and how much lycopene we should aim for is unknown. So more research is needed at that time. But there is some good strong evidence to suggest that we should be including some lycopene-rich foods into our diet. So red pigment foods, not all red pigments, but a lot of them. So things like tomatoes, watermelons, grapefruits, apricots, papaya, those all have some lycopene in it. The cool thing about lycopene is we absorb it a lot better in our body if the food is heated up, so it's cooked a little bit and it has a little bit of oil. So something like a stewed tomato or a tomato juice has a lot of lycopene in it. We have a little chart here that goes through the amounts of lycopene. So a raw tomato, as you can see, has 2.5 milligrams, but the same kind of half cup serving of a tomato puree has, so like a canned tomato puree, has 29 milligrams. So that extra bit of processing really lets us absorb the lycopene a lot better. That being said, when you're buying like a tomato puree or a tomato juice, just pay attention to that food label and watch out for the amount of sodium being added because it can usually be quite high. So that being said, lycopene is really great to include in our diet, but there is no strong research to suggest taking a lycopene supplement and whether that can be helpful or not. So focus on the food first for now. The only thing to note off this chart is the grapefruit being a source of lycopene. Just watch out because grapefruit can interact with a lot of medications that men can be on. So paying attention to that first before you start adding grapefruit into your diet. Our next group is cruciferous vegetables. So this is quite a big group of vegetables. It includes things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kale, bok choy. A lot of those vegetables that tend to make us a little more gassy, but are actually quite good for us. So higher consumptions of cruciferous vegetables are associated with lower risk of developing a more aggressive prostate cancer. There was actually one study that looks at the intake of cruciferous vegetables after diagnosis, so on average they were looking at men that consumed 5.7, so around 6 servings or more per day, had a 59% lower risk of prostate cancer progression compared to those that ate less than 1.4 servings per day. So quite a lot of cruciferous vegetables to have, but looking at that, it's good strong evidence to suggest including things like cabbage and cauliflower once in a while into your diet, if not every day, trying to mix it up with some vegetables in that group. So our next nutrient we're going to look at is soy. So soy is prostate friendly. It's safe to eat. I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there about soy, but we do want to include some soy in our diet once in a while. It's a really good source of protein. It's one of those plant-based proteins that we want to try to increase. It also contains lots of fibers, minerals. It's very low in saturated fat. So soy is really good to have. So the evidence with soy and prostate cancer is a bit mixed. A lot of the research looks at comparing countries where there's high soy consumption in the diet and then more Western countries where we don't consume as much soy, and comparing the rates of prostate cancer. And overall, they have found it to be effective in decreasing prostate cancer risk. So overall, from the research, it's shown to be beneficial to include some sources of soy in your diet. So whether that's soy milk, some tofu, some edamame, about a serving a day is fine. But there isn't enough evidence to recommend taking a soy supplement, so using like a soy protein powder where the concentration of soy will be really, really high. But if you're looking for some more plant-based protein options, things like tofu and edamame are really good things to start adding into your diet. So on to supplements. So we could do a whole hour presentation just on supplements. It's a huge topic. But these include things like vitamins, minerals, herbal supplements, and other natural health products. So it's huge. It's a giant section in our drugstore. There's many Canadians that are taking supplements or some form of natural health product. But the thing there is there's no convincing evidence that any supplement will help specifically slow down prostate cancer growth or decrease our risk of prostate cancer recurring or coming back. So that being said, supplements can be included in our diet to help meet some gaps in it, but always approach supplements with a little bit of caution, because the big thing with supplements is there just hasn't been enough research in the area looking at specific natural health products and its effect on all these diseases. So don't treat it just as a food that you eat. I would say treat it as a medication. It does have a strong potent effect in our body with some of them, so they should be used with caution. Just as an example, there was a research trial called the SELECT trial, and it happened here in Canada, the United States, and Puerto Rico. I think it was back in 2001, and there was actually some men that were in our prostate cancer group that were part of this trial. And originally they had thought that the minerals and vitamins, selenium and vitamin E, could be helpful and prevent prostate cancer. So these men were given these supplements in just regular doses that we would find in the drugstore, not crazy high doses. And they actually ended up stopping the supplementation early because they found that it actually might be harmful. So for selenium, these men were given a 200 microgram per day supplement, so what they found is for men that were already getting enough selenium through their regular diet, and then they took the supplement on top of it, that level of selenium in their body was actually shown to be harmful. And then with vitamin E, they were given a 400 international unit per day supplement, and taking that actually increased the risk for prostate cancer. So they did stop this trial early, so it's just a good kind of example that even the nutrients that we think and read that might be helpful for our disease, when you actually do the research, it might not actually show that. So that's the problem with a lot of natural health products and supplements and why we need to be cautious. That being said, I don't want to scare you away from selenium and vitamin E. We still need them in our body, in our diet, but we can easily get it from whole foods. So selenium, it's very easy to get from whole grains, dairy, nuts and seeds. In fact, one single Brazil nut contains about 70 micrograms of selenium, so that meets 100% of our needs. So it just shows how easy it is to get. Vitamin E, quite similar. We can get it through dark leafy greens, eggs, nuts, seeds, wheat germ, any food that has a little bit of fat in it. We can absorb vitamin E pretty easily. So in general, when it comes to supplements, I would say focus on trying to get a lot of your vitamins and minerals and nutrients from foods first. But you can take supplements. So if you're not on treatment, we're less concerned about interactions or it affecting your treatment. So do make an informed choice when you're choosing to take a supplement. And always keep in mind that overall there is a lack of research and evidence to support a lot of these supplements. If you are on treatment, remember that we do want to avoid supplements that might interact with certain medications, or those that are really high in antioxidants that might interact with things like radiation. So always do your research and ask your oncologist, your pharmacist, your health professionals to help inform whether you should be taking this supplement during this time or not. Now on to bone health. So that being said, we're going to talk about calcium and vitamin D, which are two nutrients that really affect our bone health. Most of us reach our peak bone mass around the age of in our 20s, and then after that we all kind of deteriorate from there. So age, everything can be a factor in losing our decreasing bone mass. But both diet and exercise can help maintain or slow down the losses of our bone mass, which could lead to osteoporosis with that loss. Those on hormone therapy, so ADT, the loss in bone mass can be even accelerated even more. So that's why it takes a little bit more work to prevent osteoporosis during that time. So from a diet perspective, both calcium and vitamin D are the nutrients we want to focus on. So this is a little chart kind of talking about how much calcium and vitamin D we should be aiming for each day. So starting with calcium, so it's good for calcium to try to get it from food first before we look at supplements. Only because too much calcium, it can be really hard on our heart, so it's been linked to increased heart disease and the development of kidney stones. But we still need enough to help our bones, so it's a little bit of a balance. So if we can get it from food first and just meet our needs, that's better than taking a supplement and getting too much calcium. So for calcium, if we're under the age of 70, we need about 1,000 milligrams a day. 71 and more, we need about 1,200 milligrams a day. Or if you're on a hormone therapy, that's also about 1,200 milligrams a day. So I recommend, we're going to go through a list of some calcium-rich foods, and if we can get it through foods first, choose that over supplements. Vitamin D is the other one. Unlike calcium, it's actually really hard to get through our diet. It comes from things like fatty fish, egg yolks, and we get it from the sun, but here in Canada we don't get that year-round. So because vitamin D is so hard to get from our diet and it's so important for our bones, that would be one that a lot of us will need to supplement. So those that are 70 and under, we need about 600 international units, that's what the IU stands for, per day. 71 and older, we need about 800, and then if we're on hormone therapy, our needs are even higher, so we need about 1,000 a day. So that's one where we would need to supplement calcium, try to get it from food. So this is a list of some of the food sources of calcium. So a lot of us think dairy when we think calcium. So that's very true. Dairy gives us really good sources of calcium. So for men with prostate cancer, I would recommend no more than 1 to 2 servings of dairy a day. And if you are choosing dairy, choosing the lower fat, less processed dairy. And you can mix it up and add in some more plant-based sources of calcium as well. So there's a bunch of different ones we can add in, but even things like seaweed or soy milk, a fortified soy milk, blackstrap molasses, tahini, which is a sesame paste. they all are sources of calcium. So it doesn't all have to come from dairy. You can mix it up in your diet and get some non-dairy sources as well. So moving on to our last section, we're just going to talk about some of the treatment side effects that are more common for certain types of treatments for prostate cancer, and how we can manage with nutrition. So the first one being diarrhea. So this is often a side effect of radiation treatment. So if you think about it, the prostate is in the same kind of area as your bowels. So even though they're targeting the prostate, our bowels can still be affected and become quite sensitive during that time. So a lot of us might experience some more loose, watery stools, more cramping, more urgency to go to the bathroom. So what you do is, if you're taking any stool softeners or laxatives, stop those. You don't need those anymore. And then we do want to follow a lower fiber diet just during this time while you're experiencing the side effects. So usually I'm pushing for a high fiber diet, lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, but during this time aiming for the lower fiber foods. So taking off the thick skins off fruits and vegetables like cucumbers and apples, or things that have lots of seeds like berries. They're going to be a little more hard on our bowels when they're so sensitive. And then choosing like grains that are more white grains than whole grains, just while you're experiencing the side effects. Some people find things like caffeine, spicy foods, greasy foods, or alcohol tend to stimulate our bowels a little bit more, so those may be more irritating during that time. And you're losing a lot more fluid through your bowels, so you're going to have to be a little more cautious to try to drink more water and stay on top of your fluids a little more. And if this is ever a problem when you're going through radiation, this is a good time to speak with a dietitian, and we can kind of go through your diet and try to modify to make it a little bit easier on you. So if you are experiencing this and you need some resources, BC Cancer actually has a really good resource called Low Fiber Food Choices, and it goes through low, medium, high fiber foods, and it shows substitutions to change your higher fiber diet into more lower fiber choices. So it's on our website and you can find it there. The next side effect we're going to talk about is hot flashes. So this tends to be a common one for those on hormone therapy. It's that sudden feeling of warmth, and the severity or when it happens, it varies so much from person to person. And this tends to be a hard one to try to manage for a lot of people. So there are some foods that tend to trigger it a little more than others. The best way to try to combat that is keep a food diary. So if you are getting those hot flashes, try to think back, see if there was a certain food you ate right before, and see if there's any trends that happen. Oftentimes things that are actual hot food or spicy food, caffeine and alcohol, those tend to be more common triggers. So maybe watching out for those and see if cutting those out makes a difference in the severity or frequency of the hot flashes. So we're on to the end of our presentation, and this is just an activity for you going forward to make nutrition goals and check in with yourself and figure out what you want to do for it as far as your own personal nutrition plan. So it's a good idea to first check and see how you're doing right now. You might already be eating very balanced and healthy, and you don't need to change that much. But for a lot of us, there's some areas of improvement. I would recommend just choosing one or two areas, or make one or two goals that you want to do, and work on those first instead of having this whole list of things you want to change in your diet and becoming super overwhelmed. So maybe it's eating out too much and you want to try to make more foods at home. The next step will be to make a plan. So what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And then try it out and see if that's going to work for your lifestyle. So if you're eating out too much, maybe try packing a lunch when you go to work for 3 times a week. Making a specific goal and trying to reach those numbers. And then, give yourself a few weeks, check in with yourself, see how it goes, what's worked, what's not working, what do you need to change to try to meet your goal. And then if you're really struggling, or a few weeks down the road, you feel like you've lost interest, how are you going to stay motivated, whether it's working with your partner or someone else to keep each other on track, speaking with a dietitian for some more ideas to help you reach your goal, and then keep doing that with each goal and focus on 1 or 2 at a time. So there are a lot of resources out there, but some that I really like, there is Cancer Connection. It's from the Canadian Cancer Society. It's for people with cancer and their loved ones to share their experiences and build relationships to help you get through your cancer journey. So it's a phone, and there's also online. HealthLink BC is also another great one for anyone who lives in BC. You just dial 811. We actually have a dietitian there that she works specifically for those with cancer. So if you have any quick questions or you want to work with someone a little bit more over the phone, she's a great one to call also. So that is the end of our presentation. I want to say thank you to everyone who's here and listening. If you do have any more questions or you'd like to sign up for any of our programs or modules, you can get in contact with your program coordinator and they can help set you up. So with that being said, any questions for today?